As the nation braces itself for a massive surge in illegal migrants, some states are beginning to take matters into their own hands. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has announced the Lone Star State will be chartering buses to send illegal migrants to Washington, D.C. in response to the government's lifting of Title 42. But will it be enough to stop a coming humanitarian disaster the Biden administration appears to have no interest in preventing? We'll get into that tonight in Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Biden administration doesn't care about all the illegal immigration. They care about the politics involved when the American people see what a mess this is. Doesn't bother them there are so many illegals coming into the country every day already, or that last year was essentially the all-time record, over 2 million apprehensions, encounters they call them euphemistically, at the southern border. Hundreds of thousands of additional gotaways, people who just got into the United States. Some of them are drug smugglers, poisoning our cities and towns with fentanyl. That's what's going on right now at the southern border, but the Biden administration is only really concerned with the optics. Do the American people actually see what's going on? Well, they're starting to see, and here's video from Bill Malugin of Fox News showing the mass release of single adult migrants from federal custody in Brownsville. And you have to ask yourself, if they can get into the country so easily, if they're being let into the country, who isn't being let into the U.S. at this point? I mean, who's being told that they're going to be turned back? Some of these are single adult males. Even why would they be let into the United States when they've come in illegally? Well, because Biden administration doesn't really believe in the rule of law when it comes to immigration. Doesn't really believe that illegal immigrants are even a problem of any kind for society in terms of the violations of the rule of law, the violations of U.S. sovereignty, the amount of money taxpayers spend on the services for individuals who are not legally supposed to be in the United States. Democrats say this is not just a nation of immigrants, but a nation of illegal immigrants. They believe that it doesn't matter. A person can't be illegal, they say. Well, then why have immigration laws at all? Why not just have a Congress that passes? Why not have Democrats pass a bill, or at least try to pass one, that says that anyone can come and go as they please? That starts to get pretty tough for things like voting and a tax base and a whole range of issues, right? Determining who is and who is not a part of your polity is a pretty essential component of actually having a nation state. That's a big deal, isn't it? Democrats disagree. So we know the Biden administration is not going to do very much about this. They're not going to try to stop the flow. If anything, they just want to hide the flow. They want to streamline the migrants who, by the hundreds of thousands, are already on a monthly basis coming through. Soon they expect it'll be about 18,000 a day once the Title 42 authority of the CDC expires. So what are we going to do about this? Well, some governors are stepping up. Governor Abbott of Texas has decided to, well, I'll let him tell you.
To help local officials whose communities are being overwhelmed by hordes of illegal immigrants who are being dropped off by the Biden administration, Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C. We are sending them to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border.
Chartering buses to send illegal immigrants to places where Democrats don't really expect to have to deal with them, to Democrat neighborhoods, in this case to our nation's capital itself, with the idea that, that will be hard to ignore. There'll be visuals of illegal immigrants. Now, let me just say this. This is a voluntary program. So this is not people who are being detained and put on chartered buses. They're going to be offered. This is really, at some level, a political stunt. Let's be honest about this. We're conservatives. We don't live in an alternate reality. We live in the only actual reality. And so how many people will actually get on these buses and be transferred to these areas? Probably very few, although who knows? Maybe they want a free ride in a nice chartered bus to D.C. Depends. These are illegal immigrants after all. I'm not sure how much cash they want to throw around to get to their final destination within the U.S. And Ted Cruz certainly likes the optics of this. He says it's an excellent idea, it's Governor Abbott's idea, but Texas shouldn't only send charter buses of illegal aliens to D.C. I filed federal legislation to also send them to Martha's Vineyard, very fancy place where people go in the summertime. Nantucket, same thing. Palo Alto, Greenwich, Connecticut, Scarsdale, Newport, Rhode Island, and Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. So singling out here really the preferred summer homes, for the most part, summer destinations of the Democrat elite along the coasts. That's what that list is all about from Senator Ted Cruz. And so he's trying to make a case here that one of the reasons Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and others are so favorable to illegal immigration is that they don't deal with the consequences of illegal immigration in their own neighborhoods. The drain on resources and services, the increase that will occur when you're bringing in lots of people without vetting and not knowing what or who the situation is that's actually brought them into the country. The cartels are a massive component of the human smuggling here. There's some that are saying the cartels are making up to $100 million a week at the southern border right now on the smuggling operations alone. So while all of that is going on, Democrats get to say it's not their problem. And some are saying, no, we're going to actually make sure the American people see what's really going on here. Here's Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, for example, saying he's going to send illegals to sanctuary states like Delaware.
What we're doing in Florida is saying, we're not going to let the recklessness of those policies impact our state. So we do not, if businesses or if contractors are dumping people who are illegal into Florida from southern Texas, we're going to go after their ability to do business in Florida. If Biden is dumping people, which he has dumped people, they fly them in at 2 a.m. They haven't done it lately, but they did it many months ago. We now have money where we can reroute them to sanctuary states like Delaware, and we're going to do that to make sure that we're keeping people safe here.
Reroute them to Delaware. And by the way, to give you a sense of just how serious the Biden administration, the Biden regime really is about the illegal immigration tsunami that has already been underway, it's only going to get bigger. It's going to turn into a massive tidal wave here soon. They actually hand out phones to illegal immigrants so they can track them, they say, and tell them, hey, it's time for you to show up to a hearing. Yeah, I guess how well that works out. But Jen Psaki admits that they actually do give free phones. Watch.
Thank you, Jen. First, on immigration, our team in Texas is saying that you guys are starting to give smartphones to border crossers, hoping that they'll use the phones to check in or to be tracked. Which part of that is supposed to deter people from crossing illegally into the states?
Well, I think you of all people, since you've asked me a range of questions on this topic over time, would recognize that we need to take steps to ensure that we know where individuals are and we can track and we can check in with them.
Yeah, do you think those individuals who are in the country illegally are really going to answer the phone call when it's, hey, can you show up at your asylum hearing? Hey, can you check in with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement now to enter you into the system? Because they don't even know who or where these individuals are. I'm going to go with probably not so much. Then there's, of course, Obama's former DHS Secretary Jay Johnson earlier today, speaking some sanity. He's a Democrat, but he's a sane Democrat. Here he is saying it is absolutely a crisis at the border. Watch.
If you go to Laredo, Texas, which is 85% Mexican-American, they want our border under control. Numbers of 7,000 a day, and the estimates are now is it could climb over 10 to 18 possibly, are not sustainable. They're not sustainable in the communities across the border that have to absorb this population, Catholic Charities. It's not sustainable for the Border Patrol and ICE to be able to track these people and keep up with these people. And it's not sustainable politically for the Biden administration.
So you'd agree there's a crisis at the border right now?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, there is a crisis at the border, and Democrats are about to make it a whole lot worse. All right, radio talk show host Amber Athey was fired from her job at WMAL in Washington, D.C. just last week. The reason? She made a joke about Vice President Kamala Harris's suit. Yeah. Amber Athey joins us next to tell us how it all went down. But first, we're living in chaotic times, and foreign identity thieves love that chaos. American homeowners have become a favorite target for these criminals. It's not just your credit cards and bank accounts they're after. That's small-time stuff. These hackers want our homes. The crime is home title theft. It's exploding. It's becoming more and more problematic all across the U.S. Here's what happens. An identity thief finds your home's title online, forges their signature on a quitclaim deed, pretends that that person now owns the home, takes out loans, leaves you with the payments. This is not a complicated crime, but it is a devastating one. So you want to make sure you're protected. Go right now. Register your address at HometitleLock.com because you could be a victim of this crime and not even know it. Go protect your most valuable asset right now. Go to HometitleLock.com Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com. Amber Athey joins us in a moment. As we've learned in recent years, just about anything can get you canceled these days, even, as my next guest recently found out, a joke, a harmless one at that, about the vice president's wardrobe. Last week, former WMAL talk show host Amber Athey tweeted, "Kamala looks like a UPS employee. What can Brown do for you? Nothing good, apparently." It was a reference to UPS's slogan and the clothing that Kamala Harris was wearing. 8 days later, the DC-based talk radio station WMAL fired Athey, claiming she had violated the company's social media policy. Joining me now to share her story with us is Amber Athey. Amber, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
All right, so just take us to this, because one of the parts of this, we're doing really the anatomy of a cancel culture smear here, right? I mean, we're kind of figuring out how this all comes together. You just went through it. The tweet initially wasn't a problem, so to speak, right? I mean, you tweeted this out. It was a joke. People saw it as a joke. And then days later, something else happened. Well, how'd this go down?
Yes, and this is often the case with cancellations, is that it's never actually the offense that riles people up. It's when you say something else they don't like, and then they have to find a reason to cancel you. In this case, I was involved in a Twitter debate about trans kids because I oppose the idea of chemically castrating or having surgical interventions for children who are convinced that they are transgender. This was a problem for left-wing activists who decided that I needed to be silenced because I was sharing too many facts about the harmful effects of some of these interventions in regards to children's gender. And they went back and they found this tweet about Kamala Harris's outfit and reframed it as racist, claiming that the "What can Brown do for you" comment was actually about her skin color. They then proceeded to try to cancel me by contacting my employers with angry emails. And unfortunately, WMAL, which is owned by Cumulus Media as its parent company, decided that I would be fired.
By the way, I want to get back to the cancellation, but I think this is fascinating because we're talking about this elsewhere on the program today, and I've been talking about it for days now. You said you discussed the risks of that kind of radical intervention for transgender kids. I think I'd like to hear, I'd like the audience to know, what are the risks?
Yeah, it's a great question. When children are put on these things called puberty blockers, which is to delay the onset of puberty so they can decide whether or not they actually want to change gender or not, which of course is already a falsity because you can't change your sex. But they are put on the puberty blockers, and then if they decide to go ahead and continue with the transition, they're then put on hormone therapy. And the combination, the 1-2 punch of those things can lead children to become infertile, meaning if they decide to detransition later on down the line, they're not able to have children. And there are other side effects like the risk for osteoporosis, and even some preliminary studies have suggested that it can affect your brain chemistry and your intellectual ability. So there's a lot of really dangerous side effects. And again, these are minors. These are people who can't consent to this type of life-changing decision and have any idea whether or not they want to have kids in the future. And the adults are sort of forcing this on them through methods of indoctrination.
Okay, so now back to your cancellation, but thank you for that, by the way, because I think people do need to hear that. As we see, there really is a trans kids agenda that the left has. It's a real thing at Disney. It's a real thing in classrooms and other places across the country. And I think the American people are waking up to this. But so you're in the process of being canceled. So they come after you. Was it one activist group? Do you know who it was? And then how did your employer initially approach you about this?
Yeah, so I think that it wasn't a specific activist group. The main individual that started this was a freelance journalist by the name of Stephen Monticelli, who writes for the Daily Beast, the Rolling Stone, Yahoo News, and a handful of other left-wing outlets. But if you read his reporting, he's actually just an activist. For example, he went after 2 college students at the University of North Texas because they wanted to bring someone to campus who had had experience with his child being forced to transition. And his followers, who are also, of course, left-wing activists who have their pronouns in their bio and Ukraine flags and are all about canceling conservatives, decided to pile on and start sending emails to my employer. Now, you would expect that a company that hosts conservative content would have the courtesy to go and ask their talent about the tweet and try to get their opinion on it. But that didn't happen in this case. Instead, I received a phone call out of the blue from two corporate executives from Cumulus to inform me that they determined that the Kamala Harris tweet was racist, that it had violated their social media policy, and that I would be terminated effective immediately with no recourse.
Just so everyone can see, because your tweet about the brown suit that the vice president was wearing, the clothing that she was wearing, here is, you see there, that you were clearly referencing the clothing that she was wearing. And I mean, I'm just wondering, was there even an opportunity for you so you weren't able to present your case? Was it even something where you were able to say to the executives who called you, you guys realize that this is unfair and you're just bending the knee to the woke mob, right? I mean, were you able to have any exchange with them, or were they just, corporate boilerplate, thank you, and, hang up?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an exchange, but after they initially told me that they had determined the tweet to be racist and that I was being fired, I said rather incredulously, you do realize the tweet was about her outfit, right? And their response was okay, and then continued to read their corporate script. At the end of the phone call, I actually requested that I be able to make a parting statement for the record, and I spoke for probably about 3 or 4 minutes explaining the dangers of them caving to this honest left-wing woke mob cancellation, and also talked about how many other people had made similar jokes about Kamala Harris, including Michael Che from Saturday Night Live, who I assume is probably not a racist. And at the end of that, similarly to my first interjection, they responded, okay, and then basically have a nice life.
I'm just wondering, has anyone from inside of Cumulus, even, off the record, reached out to you to say that they agree with? I mean, I'm talking about executives now. I also want to know about hosts. I mean, who has rallied to your defense on this one? Let's look at the upside of this.
Definitely. I haven't heard from any other Cumulus executives, but I have received a lot of support from the other hosts at WMAL. My former co-host, Larry O'Connor, has been very outspoken.
Oh, I love Larry. Larry was your co-host? Larry's a great guy.
I know, Larry. Yeah, Larry's the best. He spoke out on his program. Dan Bongino, who hosts the afternoon show, actually had me on the show the day that this happened. Vince Colony, Chris Plant have all talked about this on their programs and on their social media. So they've been very supportive. And I mean, I have to be clear, this is a corporate decision. I can't blame the other people at WMAL. None of us knew that this was going to happen until after the call was already made to me. So not only did they not have the courtesy and respect to allow me to defend myself, but they also didn't take into consideration the views of my co-hosts as well as the other talent at WMAL.
Amber, stay strong. It's going to be all right. I know you know that, but we appreciate you staying in the fight, and we'll have you back soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Buck.
Disney, a company once known for animated fairy tales and family-friendly entertainment, has now become America's foremost corporate purveyor of woke politics and gender theory propaganda. So can the company wade into controversial topics like Florida's education bill and still be a storyteller you can trust with America's children? Our friend and author columnist David Marcus just returned from the Magic Kingdom. He'll join us next to give his take. Stay with us. Disney's entrance into the culture wars doesn't appear to be hurting their bottom line just yet. The company claims its streaming service, Disney Plus, is now on its way to exceeding Netflix's subscriber numbers in the coming years. Still, a growing backlash from conservatives could ultimately derail the company's ambitions here. The Post-Millennial reports many longtime Disney fans are reportedly canceling trips and subscriptions in great numbers recently due to concerns of the company's woke take on several current issues. Author and columnist David Marcus has just returned from Disney World in Orlando, Florida. He joins us now to share his thoughts. David, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Buck, how you doing?
So what's it like down there? I don't think, maybe I went when I was a little kid. I don't remember it, though. Disney World, how is it? Are the wokesters really running the show?
It wasn't for me, Buck, but the answer to your question is no. What I was struck by being down there in the resort and sort of around the park was that there was a real disconnect between this progressive trans ideology that you're hearing from the diversity team and the executives and what you saw on the ground. I mean, on the ground, The little girls were dressed as princesses. The little boys were dressed as superheroes. The moms had sparkly, Disney ears. And they were buying all of these very gendered things at the gift shop, right? So it was very clear to me that Disney is not trying to implement this extraordinarily woke and progressive agenda in the face of the crowds at the park. And I think that makes a lot of sense.
So this is fascinating right now, David. I mean, your piece, which is on FoxNews.com, says that despite the fevered dreams of the diversity team recently exposed on a Zoom call demanding more non-binary characters, at the resort, little girls are still princesses, the boys still smack each other around with lightsabers, and even the adults hew to gender norms. So now I'm sure there are people who would say to you, David, well, not yet, but that the transformation is underway as evidence from that Zoom call. So I mean, do you think, it feels like we don't ever see these things until it's too late, right? And a lot of people didn't realize the trans agenda would in fact result in the NCAA 500-meter women's champion in swimming being a man, being a biological male. Just on the corporate side of things, do you think that they're beginning that process of trying to institute, to essentially eradicate these gender norms you say that are still existing? Or are they just virtue signaling for each other and recognize that America's actually not with them? Like, you still do want to go and see Disney princesses and kids with lightsabers, etc.
I think that's the balance that they're trying to walk, and I think they made a really bad bet here in going all in against the Florida parental rights bill, because I think at the time at which they were contemplating doing that, the Democrats had called it this "Don't Say Gay" bill, which was obviously a complete lie. But what we started seeing about a week or two ago was polling that actually showed people the legislation, and like even Democrats support it. So really quickly, I think that the Democrats and the wokesters at Disney wound up on the wrong side of this particular issue. And I do think that they're going to be very careful about putting this into their products and into their parks, because that's the financial risk, right? The real financial risk is not boycotts or protests. It's that their product becomes so woke that people stop buying it.
David, you're in Florida right now, and obviously that has been the big front line, if you will, in the fight over gender identity training for children. I'd say it has been pretty remarkable to watch just how many people have come out and suggested that if you won't teach kindergartners about trans ideology, you're a bigot and a bad person. And then they're surprised that there's a backlash from the American people about that a majority of even Democrats in the state of Florida, for example, as I think you mentioned, aren't on board.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a huge problem. You saw, I guess it was 2 days ago, you saw Mayor Adams, for some reason, nobody asked for this at all, dig into this issue by saying he was going to put billboards up in Florida saying, "Move back to New York because you can say gay here." It's absolutely absurd. But this is what the Democrats need to cling to, because I think we spoke about this recently, Buck. Like, Jen Psaki, was asked that specific question, should Leah Thompson be competing? And she said, oh, well, that's up to the NCAA. That's not going to fly anymore. In this election cycle, Democrats are going to be on debate stages being asked, do you think a biological man should be competing against women? They have no answer for that question right now. They better figure one out.
Also, since you brought up Mayor Eric Adams, I know you have a piece that you're going to be publishing soon on, I'm a New Yorker still, unfortunately in some ways because of what's going on here. How do you assess, the fact, I had to say, the focus on trying to get people to move, it was as if Eric Adams had never been to South Beach or any major city in Florida. Like, no one's afraid of being gay. This is all a figment of the left's imagination. And no one's moving to New York because Florida is such a bigoted state. This was crazy, but it felt like a pathetic effort to try to distract from a city that is not turning around the way we had hoped, at least 100 days in. How do you assess it?
I'm disappointed. I was pretty bullish on Adams, in part because I thought, like, what on earth could be, worse or as bad as de Blasio. But it's a problem. I mean, he's forcing toddlers to wear masks at the same time that he's begging New Yorkers to come back to the office, right? And that sends such a completely warped message to people. Look, I think that he has done some positive things with regard to the police. It's clearly not enough. He won't stand up to Albany on bail reform. Look, the guy's a disappointment. I hate to be the one to say it, and I have some egg on my face because I wanted to give the guy a chance. It's not good, Buck.
On the crime issue, is he that was the one place we thought, okay, he's a former cop, the new mayor in New York, because the whole country is going to watch what happens with crime in New York City and see if we could have another Giuliani era miracle, right, where the crime level drops precipitously, very, and revitalizes the whole city as a result. Is he even doing that well?
I wouldn't say well. He is doing things, right? I mean, these anti-crime plainclothes police units that go out there and try to sort of like proactively stop crime are supposedly back on the streets. If that's true, and if that's a big force, that helps. He's clearing out some homeless encampments. There are some positives. The real problem, though, Buck, is this bail reform, because as soon as the cops arrest people, they're right back on the street. And thus far, Adams has not been willing to spend his political capital to challenge bail reform, which is a state issue up in Albany. Instead, he's having dinner with Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo. So no, he's clearly not in the mold of Giuliani, and it's a real shame.
Well, we'll keep watching him and calling balls and strikes. Thanks so much. Good to see you, David.
Thank you, Buck.
Republican candidates swept a school board election in Wisconsin after parents complained that they were no longer listening to their concerns. Could we be reaching a turning point in conservative efforts to reclaim children's schools from far-left ideologues? We have more on that with the host of Counterculture on the Epoch Times, Danielle D'Souza Gill, when we come back. First, I want to talk to you about protecting your online data. A lot of companies promise your privacy is guaranteed, but we know that's not true. That's why you need a new privacy and cybersecurity application tool called Secure. It's spelled S-E-K-U-R. Secure is using proprietary encryption and offering secure instant messaging and email. With Secure, all of your communication is based on servers and data centers hosted in Switzerland without using any of the big tech platforms. Privacy is a big issue now. That's why you need Secure. They're your solution to the constant theft of digital identity that's occurring all the time. Costs only $5 for the messenger, only $10 for the messenger and email combination package. Go to secure.com and take back your privacy today. That's SEKUR.com. Use promo code BUCK for 25% off. We'll be right back with more. Hold the line. As parents across the country continue to fight progressive education and critical race theory, they're making sure to have their voices heard this election season as they put more conservative newcomers on school boards. That includes Waukesha, Wisconsin, where 3 Republican-backed candidates swept the race yesterday. These candidates allege the Waukesha School Board had stopped listening to the concerns of parents in the community, and it turns out they were right. So, will we start to see this playing out in even more places? We've already seen the fights in Northern Virginia over school boards and the woke left and all the rest of it. Let's ask Danielle D'Souza, host of the Counterculture podcast. Danielle, great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Buck.
So just tell everyone what happened here. I mean, this was getting some headlines. Another group of concerned parents decide we're going to take it back from the wokesters at the school board.
Yeah, I think whenever the left is in power, they always plan to kind of beat us into submission, basically force us to live in their America. But I think when it comes to kids and forcing them to live in this kind of woke classroom is really a step too far. And so these parents find a way to either run for school board or report these people. Like in Pennsylvania, we saw that those 5 school board members were reported because they were basically forcing kids to wear masks when the state policy was a mask optional policy. So we either basically have to report them or run against them when they are enforcing these kinds of things on young kids.
It is also amazing to see how we're told that this isn't happening, Danielle. I mean, this was true during the whole critical race theory discussion, where they kept saying, well, there is no critical race theory being taught in schools. And then they said, well, it's not critical race theory, it's something else. And then you can't understand what critical race theory is unless you're upper level law school professor, who focuses. I mean, they just kept changing what the defense of this stuff was. And then more and more stuff comes out where it's not even necessarily they're teaching critical race theory, but they're actually exercising critical race theory or instituting critical race theory in classrooms, as well as just general left-wing indoctrination. I mean, here's a California high school teacher, this one got some attention, who says she took down the American flag in her classroom because it made her uncomfortable. Here's what she replaced it with. Watch.
Okay, so during third period, we have announcements and they do the Pledge of Allegiance. I always tell my class, stand if you feel like it, don't stand if you feel like it, say the words if you want, don't have to say the words. So my class decided to stand but not say the words. Totally fine. Except for the fact that my room does not have a flag. It used to be there, but I took it down during COVID because it made me uncomfortable. And I packed it away and I don't know where, and I haven't found it yet. But my kid today goes, hey, it's kind of weird that we just stand and then, we say it to nothing. And I'm like, oh, well, I gotta find it. Like, I'm working on it. I got you. In the meantime, I tell this kid, we do have a flag in the class that you can pledge your allegiance to. And he looks around, he goes, oh, that one?
Yes, pledge allegiance to the gay pride flag.
Wow, it's so sickening, the fact, too, that she is just rejoicing over the fact that she's basically fooling kids. Like, ha, 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 I hid the flag and I caught you and stuff. I mean, I think it just shows that, when it comes to the flag, oftentimes we kind of phrase it as like, these people are pro-America and these people are anti-America, but they basically want to remake America by starting with the youngest kids and making them so that they are anti-American from the time they're young, from the time that they're, kind of learning all of this pro-LGBTQ ideology, kind of learning about all of these, these sexual things that they're teaching to these kids that we're trying to stop them from doing. So I think it shows that they have this long-term path of how to remake America, and that's why they start with these youngest kids.
Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota, tweeted this out: political indoctrination has no place in our classrooms. I signed an executive order today to block critical race theory at K-12 public schools in South Dakota. Noem sometimes likes to sign executive orders with no real teeth in them, but I guess, good messaging from her. Here we have, because she had, refused to sign the bill that would have protected women from transgender competitors in her state, and then said that she signed an executive order after she rejected the bill. So she plays this game sometimes. But on the issue of critical race theory in schools in general, it feels like this is an argument the left is losing and could have real consequences going into the midterms. How do you think parents are going to view this, and how do they stay on the topic?
I think a lot of governors are starting to realize, wow, DeSantis, he got so much kind of traction. He's gotten so much praise because he was such a great governor during COVID. He's really been on top of not just that issue with masks and so on, but also CRT, also this issue, now Disney, and so on. So these other governors are like, whoa, okay, I need to do more too. So good job, Noem, I guess, for getting on that bandwagon. But I think these other parents, of course, they're going to show up in the midterms. I mean, if they themselves are running for school board, getting involved in local things, of course they're going to show up for that. And I don't think it's going to be good for the Democrats. And every single thing the Democrats put out, it's basically saying, this is why we're losing. We already know it's happening. So they're already feeling the pain. So many Democrats aren't even rerunning in Congress because they know it's just going to be a big loss for them. So I think that this issue is here to stay. And the fact that the left is doubling down on this in terms of censorship on social media, I think shows there's just going to be this long-term battle between these two sides of America. One that has these kind of elite oligarchs that basically want to force this down these children's throats. And then the other people who are the parents, the grassroots movement, who say, no, we're done.
The Biden administration, by the way, promoted the use of puberty blockers recently for transgender children. This was in a bunch of documents. We're switching gears here a little bit, by the way, but a bunch of documents the White House released in the last week or so. And in the Biden administration's promotion of the use of these puberty blockers, they cited a study from an LGBT group funded in part by a manufacturer of the controversial drugs used in gender reassignment. This is pretty remarkable. I think the more Americans find out that the White House is openly advocating for children to receive life-altering, hormone-blocking drugs and even have full-on transgender surgery before they've entered puberty, I think this is going to be a problem for the Democrats, the more people find out about this.
It is. And the fact that, I mean, they're experimenting on children, number one, they're using these children as their guinea pigs. But two, we see this kind of triad alliance between the government, the Biden administration, who's pushing this purely because of ideology, not because of anything else. And secondly, we have these LGBTQ groups who are these activist groups, these leftist groups who push the Democrats. And then third, we have organizations like Pfizer who make these. And so we see them all kind of in alliance. And the rest of us basically just have to stand up and say, no, this is too much. I mean, seeing these kids who haven't even hit puberty, they really don't actually know what they're taking into their body. If you're giving them to this, you're a nurse and so on. Sometimes the parents aren't even informed. And later you find out that this was kind of, this horrible thing happening to your child. I can't imagine that parents would not see this as a reason to speak out against it.
It's really stunning. I mean, lifelong sterility is a common side effect of taking just the hormones, never mind the surgery that's being advocated here by the Biden White House. It's strange times we're moving into here, Danielle, but thanks for being with us. Appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
The strict lockdowns in China are getting stranger by the day as video emerges of drones being used to warn Shanghai residents to, quote, control your soul's desire for freedom. Fauci would love that. We'll have the video for you in Quick Hits. Dr. Fauci blames President Trump for COVID-19 deaths, and KETANJI Brown Jackson is confirmed to the United States Supreme Court. We have those stories and more in Quick Hits. Let's dive in. This was remarkable. Fauci is, in so many ways, the face and the voice of COVID lockdowns, mask mandates, vaccine mandates. He is more personally associated with that than anyone else in the world. Now, to be fair, in China, they have taken these things a little bit further than anywhere else, and they're still doing it, which is something that I think everybody needs to keep in mind here. Here is a drone in Shanghai. Remember, Shanghai is a city of over 20 million people. It's on full lockdown. You can't even leave your house to walk your dog. You are locked into your apartment. You are locked into your home. You're not allowed to leave. I mean, where is this going? But here's what they're doing. Because people were upset about this, they started to sing out their windows and call to other people who were locked down. So the Chinese Communist Party and the authorities that work for it decided to send drones up in the sky to tell residents to comply with COVID restrictions and control your soul's desire for freedom. Yeah, watch. Control your soul's desire for freedom. Drones announcing that up at your window. Remind, they're going up to people's windows because they were open. Oh, you're not allowed to open the windows, by the way. Not allowed to open the windows. That's real lockdown, isn't it? Fauci's jealous, of course. He's like, where are the drones when I need them? He would do this in a heartbeat if he could get away with it. This guy's a lunatic megalomaniac. And a liar, too. I mean, here he is. He's reappeared on the scene, just like we said. Where's Fauci? Where's Fauci? And now we know. Fauci's out there blaming Trump for undermining lockdowns and that led to COVID deaths. Watch.
Could we have had a lot fewer deaths?
I believe so. I believe so. I mean, I can't quantitate it for you about how many less deaths. You can't even model that, I don't think. But there were certain things that were done that if they were done differently, we likely would have had. For example, when we were trying to lock down, if you use that word, that's a very charged word for some people. Remember, when we were trying to get the 15-day and then the 30-day extension during the Trump administration, and yet he was coming out right after we came out and I said with Dr. Birx, let's do the 15, 30-day, he would get up and say, liberate Virginia, liberate Michigan, which was just completely contrary and antithetical with what we were trying to do. But if we had really locked down, we probably wouldn't have lost a lot of people early on.
He's a moron. I mean, he's lying to you. The lockdowns were about hospital capacity. So then why extend beyond 15 days for another 30 days as if getting people to somewhat hide from the virus is going to do anything? And then the plan was essentially to keep doing intermittent semi-lockdowns until we got to a vaccine. Then we figured out the vaccine doesn't stop the spread, and a lot of people are going to die even after the vaccine is given out. That is what actually happened. Here's one question for Fauci. If Trump was so bad, Trump did such a bad job, how is it that Biden, in year 2, with more knowledge about the virus and a vaccine distributed to over 200 million Americans, had more deaths on Biden's watch by the numbers, the CDC's own numbers, than in Trump year 1 when we're hit by a virus felt like out of nowhere? Explain that one, Fauci, you vile little liar. He's disgusting. Just in case you're wondering. Senate confirmed KETANJI Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. She was confirmed 53-47. Senators Susan Collins of Maine, Mitt Romney of Utah, and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska voted for Judge Jackson. Now, let me just say, Collins, you can give something of a pass to because she's just trying to keep her seat. She's a Republican in a blue state, so we'll let her play the game the way she has to. But she has some consistency on this because she defers to the president's pick when the president's in office, right? That's as long as it's reasonable. So she voted for Kavanaugh and voted for KETANJI Brown Jackson, by example. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska is an anti-Kavanaugh vote in the past. So that is unforgivable. I mean, she should be primaried. She should be defeated by Republicans in the state of Alaska. She should not be allowed to represent the Republican Party anymore. That is an unforgivable choice that she made. She voted for Judge Jackson. And then there's Mitt Romney, who just wants to be liked by the fancy people that own houses almost as big as his, and the people who write at the New York Times, and the people who, write for CNN and go on TV there, all that stuff. Yeah. And then there's Jen Psaki with this one, saying that sex reassignment surgery and puberty blockers for kids is a best practice. Watch.
Every major medical association agrees that gender-affirming healthcare for transgender kids is a best practice and potentially life-saving.
You're going to change kids' gender before they even go through puberty. That's it for tonight's Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is next. Shields high.